if you quit your job or the thing that gives you cash and you go and do this other thing all in, you're probably not going to take out any money from that thing for a very long time.
You want to launch a product in 6 months, like it's going to be 10.
80% of your leverage in sales is probably just going to come from like one channel and like finding excellence in one place.
If I hear the word sizzle reel one more time video, it's like, which would go great.
All right, this week on the Brand Fathers, it is just two of the fathers. The triumvirate is not here. Jordan
they
is
sent
at
Jordan to help with the lobbying efforts in Canada surrounding tariffs. So he set up camp in the Pacific Northwest. He's going back and forth. You know, it's a great use of his skill set.
Well, I was going to say he's been sent to the monasteries to upgrade his preacher training. But either or, yes, he is.
He's got a
he's
preacher
working
vibe.
on.
He's kind of got like he's 2 steps away. If we get the robes on, he's very priestly.
He does. So it's just the two of us in the lab today, and what are we going to be talking about today, Oren?
So we are going to be talking about myths that people encounter when they're building their brands. So both Ashwin and I have built a bunch of brands, have brands we are running currently at various stages from brand new to a few years old that have gone through every problem in the book. And we just hear all this talk online, right? Of like, oh, I need to do this, or I need to do that, or X or Y, or we should spend money. And we're just in these conversations. And I think we just want to get really frank with anyone who is building a brand about stuff you should and shouldn't spend money on, things that are a waste of time or not, and the challenges that we've gone through.
100%. And I think, so we obviously have this firsthand experience, but I think a lot of what we share is going to be colored by, you and I probably talk to 5 to 10 brand owners a week. We do a ton of consulting calls, and we find that there's a lot of, just a lot of misconceptions that people have, or where we see them wasting their time. And so we try to course correct them pretty quickly. And they're like, oh, I never even thought about that. Or I thought I had to hire an agency to do this. So this is going to be helpful for anyone who is running a brand and is maybe like banging their head against the wall of how to grow it. I think it is going to be helpful for anyone thinking about starting a brand and maybe asking this question of like, do I need to leave my corporate 9 to 5 in order to go start this new matcha brand that I want to sell on Amazon? And I think we're just going to hit each one of these points kind of one by one with what we hear and then what we've experienced ourselves.
Let's do it.
All right. So myth number 1, you need to quit your day job to go start a brand. You got to go all in. You got to go, it's 24/7 grind to get a brand off the ground. What do you think?
Oh, man. Obviously, like, as people that have multiple projects, we are not the poster children for this. But I do think the biggest conversation I would have is that like you should quit your job when you have fit and some level of scale and you can't possibly keep it going, but the money's already coming in. The biggest misconception I see is that people will go start a brand, especially like an e-com brand, and they will be like, cool, I have X amount of runway. I'm putting it all on the line, and we're going to go kind of try and make this work and make money right away. And I just feel like that makes undue pressure on the business to like not understand where it is to have fit. And so I'm basically like, I would build as long as possible while you have the stability of something else. And because then if you don't have that money or the product doesn't have that fit, you can kind of work around that. And also everything takes longer. As you know, like you want to launch a product in 6 months, like it's going to be 10. And I think that that's the biggest thing people run into is all of a sudden now they're extremely stressed. Whereas if you moved it slower, then you probably could have made it work easier.
Yeah, 100%. And I think there's a number of things to kind of think about here. Number one, there's this myth that especially, and again, I think we're really kind of talking about e-commerce brands here, right? If you want to go build like a very serious biomed tech company or hardware company, you probably need to like dedicate more of a full-time effort. But with e-commerce, just the cost to bring a new product to market have dramatically decreased. The ability for you to do all of these things remotely, between us, we probably launched like 4 or 5 brands remotely, never even meeting our partners in person, got them to like some sizable amount of scale. And it's like, hey, in certain stages, there's an ebb and flow of time that you put in. Maybe it's like 15 hours this week, maybe it's 30 hours the next week. Other weeks, it's like 5 hours. But the cost and time involvement to get something off the ground have dramatically shrunk. So you can do a lot more with this additional bandwidth that you have. But I think most importantly, and this probably leads into a kind of like another myth that we'll talk about, is if you quit your job or the thing that gives you cash and you go and do this other thing all in, you're probably not going to take out any money from that thing for a very long time. That's going to replace your income. So you need to get that product market fit and scale first. So it's not this either or, like I would love to quit my job and then start a brand. It's like, do it on the side.
Yeah, and the biggest one I want to call out if you have a physical product, and so almost all the things I've done besides the agency we had were physical products, right? And so the cash flow of that is, I think, what people underestimate. So as many of you know, I've worked on this women's wear brand for years and years now that I'm now a partner in, and we are 7 years in. It's going really successful now, but for the last like 6, everything was caught in cash flow, where basically it was like, hey, we have to order ahead. We started going to retail who pay late. So now you kind of have we're getting a 6-month turn on a lot of the cash that's coming in, like product that's down, and you're negotiating deposits or whatever. But if you want to sell more, you need more units. And so our lives became like a monthly, okay, how much money do we absolutely need to take out of this business for people to live, like to then go on to this like next iteration? And you could literally be like, man, if we didn't take that out, that, it's a 6x revenue return, it's a 2x profit return we're missing. You start to do the math and it gets really brutal to take any money out at all if you don't have to.
Yeah, I think what a lot of one of the biggest like misconceptions or myths is, hey, I have a business doing $1 million a year or $5 million a year, or $10 million a year. That means I'm rich. Like I've got a brand that does $10 million a year. It's like, hey, if you personally as the founder are taking even $100K out of that business, like good job. You're doing something right. Like there's very little like margin allowable beyond that amount to take this cash out of the business.
Well, because people see that in these drops. There's a lot of videos, especially on YouTube here, where people will be like, oh, start a clothing brand. We did 30K this month. We did 100K this month. And it's like, all right, cool. Like maybe you had a 4X markup. You ran these ads. You did X. But most importantly, you have to go reinvest in inventory, more content and more whatever. And like the people flashing the cars and whatnot are like not doing it at that level, or they have alternative income. And that's a good thing, right? Like I look at it this way. Like I don't have to take money out of any of these brands, and content has been a big game changer for that. I know it has for you too, because there's just a constant cash flow that's 100% margin or 80% margin, and then you can focus on actually building these things with every dollar available, because that's what it takes to get something competitive off the ground and do it well. Like that's an advantage you have over people that don't.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, let me just throw out a real number here. So with our first year in Oklahoma Smokes, we didn't do any paid marketing, really. I mean, we did a little bit of like PR, which was probably a mistake. We did like 680,000 in revenue and did, I want to say like 63,000 in profit. I had a partner in that business. And so both of us could, at the end of the year, be like, okay, we're each going to split that $65,000. And imagine this was our full-time jobs. Like I had an agency, he had a venture fund. So it's like, we're not looking to pull cash out of this business. But number one, we couldn't even do that if we wanted to at that 680K mark. But number two, if we take all that cash out of the business, what are we going to do next year? For actually like investing in inventory, marketing, all of these other like operational expenses you have. And so, your top line is totally different than your bottom line. And
yeah, well, maybe the biggest misconception is you get rich as a brand owner, right? And I think there is you can over time for sure, but doing that quickly, and especially with the way like also anyone who's like flashing money like that doesn't understand, like especially even tax and stuff like that, where you're like if you have inventory, like that's not something you can write off having purchased that inventory. Mm-hmm. Right? Like it's now a cost when you sell. Like there's so much cash that gets held up in things. And so the dream of doing that to like make a lot of money isn't quite there until later. The later end of that, like you can get to a cash flowing business a few years down the line, or you can get to a sellable business like at a later point on that. But it's like kind of worth understanding what you're fighting for. And a conversation I have a lot, something whenever I talk to like creator agencies or influencer agencies about launching product, is I'm like, hey, maybe you don't want to launch a brand. Maybe you just want to do merch, which is actually a better idea for some people, where it's like, hey, I'm going to launch $60,000 worth of X and Y, 2 products, and it's going to be gone, and we're going to do the math out, and I'm going to take home $40,000. And there's not a brand, and there's not a whatever, and there's not like some long sustainable thing. We're not doing X and Y. We launched this merch, and guess what? In 4 months again, we will launch different merch. And I think that is actually, if you have an audience, kind of a better business, unless you're really about this life.
Myth number 3. All I need to do is build a good product, and then everything flows from there.
Yeah. So I like to look at this fallacy is mainly like a good product plus whatever reach or conversation or thing you have gets you to X. And it's good to establish what that is. And then and so for instance, with my audience, I can sell, if I make a video or two, I can sell 30 to 50 of basically anything, which is cool, but that's not infinite. Right? That's 30 to 50. And if an MOQ is 200, you need a plan to get the rest of that. And so I think everything organically has like a point, has like a threshold. And you kind of need to look at what that is. Hey, I make this good thing. Okay, that good thing plus whatever your reach is. And it's always an equation. Just that good thing without attention is nothing. Will get you to X. And then every single thing you add on top of that incrementally of like, oh, I add more SKUs, or I add more distribution, or I add paid, or I add this retention or whatever, increases the threshold. And there's like some natural, this isn't like a mathematical equation, but I feel like there's natural breakpoints for most businesses where like this business is kind of meant to get to this size and this area with all the normal stuff. And then to get beyond that is like a whole different game.
I think when I think about this, I think two things. Number one, people think again, like good product is one of the most important things that you need, or like that's going to be 75% of success, when reality, like good product is probably 25% of success. I mean, we've seen very large and very successful brands get there with subpar product through incredible distribution and operational excellence and just a large TAM. And on the flip side, we've seen really good brands and products just falter because they can't figure out distribution or customer acquisition. And there's this phrase like first time founders care about product, second time founders care about distribution, because you understand how important that is. And I was having this conversation, I know you and I both know this, but I was having this conversation with this doctor earlier this week who was talking about how she launched this skincare line. She was in year 10 of this skincare line. And she was like, I am so kind of scarred by this experience. And like maybe they did like $1 million last year or something. And she is a practicing physician. And she's like, I formulated this product off of like all of my industry knowledge. I'm better than any of the other products on the market. I have all of these clinical like trials and like tests and images and all of this stuff behind me. And I truly have like the best product on the market. All of my physician peers think it's the best product on the market, but I just can't get people to care enough. And she was like, people are like goldfish. They have attention spans of 3 seconds. Like it is such a competitive market. Everything is competing for their time and attention all of the time. And so unless you are incredibly good at consumer marketing and distribution and emphasize that day after day after day, it is really tough to get like even good products off the ground.
Yeah, what I like about that example is what a good product sets you up for, in my opinion, is it sets you up to do direct response marketing, which we can talk about in a second, which is like the key to success when you have a good product is basically by direct response. I mean, like you are doing like a VSL or a video sales letter. You're saying, hey, I'm going to write out all of the pain points and like the benefit response that everyone has to get you to buy a thing because it is that good for you. And I can persuade you through like talking to you about it, basically, in a very direct manner. And you can do that with like certain types of ads, et cetera. If you have a good product that actually solves a consumer problem, then you can do what's called like a VSL, where you'd be like, hey, here's this problem you're facing. Or do you agitate it a bit? You add on, here's how we solve it. Here's how we solve it again. And there's an extra benefit. And there's like a proven kind of like psychological format to ads that works for that. And like you can make it work. But what happens is most people think, oh, well, just because the product's good, it's there. It's like, no, the product enables you to do direct response marketing. And you still have to do other marketing and things on top of that. But that first layer of marketing where you're selling on true consumer pain point is going to be the most effective, again, if you know how to do it. And it's funny because I'll talk to people like that in that same industry. And I'm like, hey, like, have you ever sat down and concisely walked through every customer pain point? Does the hook of every one of your ads, the first image, does it call out the pain point? I was literally looking at one about this earlier today, skincare, same example, where it's like every ad started with a picture of a saggy face. It's about skincare that raises jowls for older women. And it's like every fucking image has that called out, red line, video of someone holding it. And it's like that, they're like, this is our pain point. They're running 8,400 meta ads right now. This is a close to $100 million business. And every single one hooks on that pain point. And that's the kind of stuff that people miss, being like, oh, I have a good product, I put it out there. There's a lot more to it.
So I think that leads into a really good myth that I hadn't even put on this list. That is, a lot of people think I need whatever product category I need like a beautiful product and a beautiful brand, and let me spend a lot of time on that. And I should do marketing the same way that like big companies do marketing. Like I've talked to so many small companies that are like, we want to storytell the same way Nike storytells. And I'm just like, you are setting yourself up for success. If you look at a brand that does $30 billion in revenue when you're doing like 0 or 10 million or 20 million in revenue, and saying, hey, we need to do an out of home storytelling campaign like that. I need to go sponsor like, this golf event and like show up and like do this kind of activation, when the reality is hey, if you have that problem solution oriented product, you're actually going to get probably pretty far off of thinking about content and making meta ads that are like very direct response oriented. And I think you highlighted them well. I wanted to show an example of this because there's kind of two ways to look at this, right? So this is maybe one of my favorite examples because I'm always talking about them. But you look at a brand like Armra, and you can say, hey, Armor, I think, does like a couple $100 million a year. And you can look at Armra and say, hey, the packaging is beautiful. Oh my God, look at this photography. Like, that's amazing. Look at the language that they use here. It's like very high level, right? Your revival of health. Okay, I'm launching a new like supplement brand in this space. I'm going to talk about my brand this way. And what you have to realize is this is just their homepage that they're probably not driving much traffic to. And when you actually go look at their Facebook ad library over here, you see all of these ads. And so we talk about problem, solution. They're like, hey, kiss goodbye to bloating, constipation, and feeling slow and heavy. That language is so different than your revival of health. Then you click learn more, and you do not get this beautifully, structured branded page. You get this you get this listicle, right? 5 benefits of Armra that have everyone ditching their supplement routine. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then they just like put you into some aggressive offer, right? This is like still direct response at their scale.
Yeah. So, and I think it's funny. The Nike example is a good one because a lot of people say, I want to story tell like X or Y. And I'm always like, I have to respond to that a lot. So I have like my canned response, which is like, never look at the big company. Look at who is taking the big company's market share. And in the Nike example, I always use Hoka, where I'm like, cool, look at what happened in running. Hoka is not a good looking shoe. They've gotten a lot better now. They make, but like at the beginning of that takeover, it was like they are selling you on comfort and like they're selling a value proposition that Nike has abandoned. They're selling purely on brand, right? You never see a Nike being like, here's the 5 reasons why X or Y. Like now, maybe a little bit more, but like everything's these big overarching campaigns. And I'm like, who is taking share from them are people that are selling on value point. And like, that's really where I think we want to be doing that as well. And where the packaging comes in handy, I have another format. Whenever I'm doing an ad or doing like a video for a brand, I always run them through the same format where it's like the hook, the second shot, the meat of the video, and the extra. And I don't care about the meat of the video. I care about the hook, the second shot, and the extra. That's usually, most people actually kind of have the meat of the video right. They know their value proper, they have a good video, whatever, but they've lost these other parts. But the hook, to your point, is like, it doesn't lead with the product, it doesn't lead with the good packaging, whatever. It leads with the problem. Show me the saggy face, show me the bloated world and like the before and after. And then the second shot is what's crucial to me. That's why I like companies with good branding, is usually for me, it's like people, even if they get a good hook, then the second shot will be right into something. I'm like, no, then give me the brand proof point. Like first shot, show me the problem. Second shot, give me that good packaging. Give me that good branding. Give me that amazing piece of photography where like the second asset is now like establish the brand. And that's where the packaging helps. Then get your meat. And then the other point I think a lot of people miss is like, give me that extra at the end. Give me that like the other offer. And for the extra price of $2.99, you can get blank or wire. Oh, and also, did you know it's a hydrator or like whatever that is? So you can get that spark of like, all right, I watched this thing. Oh, I just got one more reason. And I think like if that's like how good social content is structured, right? It's basically the Mr. Beast like format of content. And I think that every brand should just be like, how do I fill in those assets? What is the problem that's a hook? If I don't have a problem, that's a problem. What is the second shot that establishes my brand? And what am I giving them as the like last thing that makes it go like, fuck it, I'm going to click, you know? I'm giving game here today. Just throw it out there.
A lot. Okay, next myth, and this one's topical because I got a DM about this morning. So here's the myth. I need to invest in PR, and when I launch my brand, I need to invest in PR and launches. I'm going to launch my brand on this day. We're going to do a big launch event. We're going to have all this stuff supporting it. So let's talk PR first. What do you think?
Man, I worked at a PR firm for years. I was a designer at a PR firm, like starting my career. My wife was a publicist for major, like top brand. Her clients were like HBO and shit when she was in publicity. So very familiar with this, but it's gone. It's done. The readership of PR is over. If you get, I dealt with this in my last job where investors were like, can we get a Wired article? And I'm like, is it fucking 2014? No one gives a shit. No one reads this. No, like you get a USA Today placement or a fucking blanket, like there's literally not one of those things that moves the needle as much as like another fucking organic video. And so I would encourage people to take that, like the only thing it does is it's a logo, if you can even use the logo without paying for it, for credibility on a fucking landing page is the only thing that PR gets you. It will not get you in front of a new audience. Now, getting creators to talk about your product or your launch is is the new PR. And there's a couple ways you can go about that. Obviously, we've both been utilized by that, and we've both talked about campaigns without being paid around that. But I think like that is the approach, is your organic story plus the story of people that talk about those things organically in your niche, like, is the new PR.
100%. And so talking about how brands can go leverage individuals and creators as the new PR. So number one, sure, you can go hire an influencer marketing agency, have them do product seeding for you. But if you just want to do it yourself, you don't have to hire agencies for everything. You just look at your product, the space that you're in, look at all of the potential demographics and audiences that you hit, and then just start searching for people both on Instagram and TikTok who are creators in those spaces, DM them and say, hey, we're launching this product, or this is a new brand. I would love to like send you some. We're doing small paid campaigns, or we're just doing product seeding, and you can get a lot of posts just for product seeding.
And also, even with campaigns, like I remember when Ladder had that thing about Peloton. The Ladder guy, who I'm like friendly with, he's just DM me stuff like that on Instagram. Edsel, the creative director, he was like, "Hey, this thing's come out. Like, I think it's interesting. Like, we did this campaign." And I look at that. I get a lot of people that DM like that, but like he didn't pay me to promote it. The brand wasn't like, pay this, but I made a video about it. And it's because I thought the video would do well. That's what people need to understand about creators. Yeah. Is like, if I'm like, hey, this is going to get 200,000 views, or, I could be the person that does the first video about this, I'm going to fucking do it. Right. Like that's an alpha for a creator to be like, this is hot enough. So your job is to come with a hot enough campaign or concept that when you DM somebody, they're not like I get a lot of those and I'm like, cool, like fucking hit the agency, like it's just not that exciting. But if it is exciting and they're like, oh, and not a lot of other people talked about it. That's the other thing, is like, someone hit me about that. The WAP guys hit me about that campaign. They're like, look, this guy, Brian Bloom did a video about it. We want you could do a video about it. I'm like, if it's someone else already did a video, if someone just sent me Ashwin's video, I'm not interested, right? Like, it's cool. I'm just redoing something someone else has already won at. But I think if you're like, hey, I'm going to try and hit a creator. Yeah, exactly. Tell you the same thing. I'm like, cool story. Yeah. That actually disincentivizes me to do it. But but I do think it's like, find those handful of relationships and try to get someone to debut it. But again, your job is to make something exciting enough organically for people to talk about.
Yes.
The latter one's a good example. One of the best examples, I will always talk about David versus Goliath. If you've been wronged by a big company, guaranteed views. And I'm not afraid to go hard. I will go hard at Peloton, Nike, but like anyone who's like big bad evil, like let's get them. And I think that's something also worth noting, that most creators understand that dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this last week with even Sweetgreen's product launch against McDonald's, and it's like such an easy target to go after.
But you also mentioned like launch events and stuff. So here's what's interesting to me about that is I actually think that you need something to anchor your launch on. If you don't have any money, don't worry about this, or low budget. But if you have a little bit of budget and you're trying to anchor something, I don't think it's a bad idea to do like a launch thing or event or whatever it is, but you have to make the most of it, right? And so one good example, this is something that Rachel Carton had in her newsletter, her link in bio newsletter, I want to shout out, but she was showing how brands were basically making content around their launch events. It'd be like the drone reveal, or they make like 4 or 5 pieces of like short form content that performed really well because they happen to have a group of people or like at like a thing. I think that's like a really good indicator. We're like, cool, you want to throw a small local thing to invite your customers out? Or one thing I've been encouraging a lot of brands I know to do, especially tech brands, is I'm like, don't do a big launch. Email your customer base and be like, in first 20 people who want to come to the office for the unveil can come to the office, and then have your CEO talk to 20 folks and bring in lunch. And the content you're going to get from that, and the value and stuff like that is amazing, right? And that's like low-hanging fruit. So it doesn't have to be some big thing, but you need the content plan around the thing. Matters more than the event itself. The event itself does not matter. The content plan around the event matters.
Yes, 1,000,000%. We were just down in Orlando for one of my brands. We were hosting an event with a bunch of dermatologists, and it was going to be this like small event. We were doing it at Topgolf. There was like 10 or 11 dermatologists there. And my partner was like, hey, we're going to have this guy come in, shoot some content. He's going to make like this really hot sizzle reel. And I'm like, hey, what are we going to do with that sizzle reel? Like, what are we going to do with this video that has no voiceover, that's just random shots of like us playing golf and like talking to other dermatologists in like white lab coats? Instead, here's what we're going to do. We're going to set up a camera, and then we're going to ask each one of them for like their hottest takes on skincare, what's overrated, what's underrated. Allow them to like walk away with pieces of content that they can post on their own feeds, but it's something for us that content's actually going to perform well, where we have these 10 people. It wasn't like a grand event, right? There's nothing about the scene or setting that we need to show off, but it's like, how do we just pull like viral content out of this, right? How do we get a little bit more creative with it?
And it's funny, and I have like a toolkit for that, because it's funny, I've been the sizzle reel, I wrote that down because I'm like, I'm going to have to do like, if I hear the word sizzle reel one more time video, it's like, which would go great. But like, so this is, I have like an event toolkit for this, right? Because you're not alone. one, but you can make almost anything interesting. People are like, well, no one's going to care about 10 dermatologists. I'm like, actually, like, so, and the format for this is like ratings is the number one. I love doing this where it's like, it's like, hey, dermatologist ranks skincare trends. And it's just like they throw it up there and it's like fucking, Botox, and it's like 1 out of 10. And then you just like, hey, just make sure there's a couple funny ones and you can run through a couple of those guys and I guarantee 1 or 2 will be good. And then like the versus, like dermatologist versus dermatologist, 9 irons only is like hilarious. Yeah. Like if you're like on like a golf or whatever it is. So you have like the versus, you have the ratings. And then there's the other one, like is like any of those where it's just like, the common questions one is like anytime you have an expert, and like we were doing this with realtors the other day, was actually hilarious where it's like, what's the thing you're most asked that like people should just know the answer to? And like some of the things about like inspections and stuff were like, it was like good content. And so I just think like you have so much of a toolkit at any event to create something good versus a sizzle reel that no one cares about.
Sizzle reel should be banned. The fathers are banning it.
And put the product front and center. This is something else. Like I went to all these South by Southwest events last week. I'm at the Amazon Prime house. And it's got like a bunch of like Amazon beach balls with like some TV. I'm like, what are we doing? And then it's like you just walk around, you take some photos. It's like so 5 years ago. But then I went to the L'Oreal one, and just disclaimer, I was there with L'Oreal, but this isn't like a paid promo. But they had the hairdryer thing, the Airlight Pro thing they have. And they were doing blowouts for women, 15-minute blowout at the show. They've got 6 stations going, and they are ripping through these young urban professionals, right? And I was like, cool. It's product focused. This makes sense. This woman's like, wow, the $600 hairdryer or $500 hairdryer. I'm experiencing it. I'm done with it. And I'm like, why are these not like go product centric like on these events? Because then if you do content, like guess what? You have a video at each one of those stations, which is like woman before, woman after, only 15 minutes with the Airlight Pro. Yep. That is a banger piece of content, right? Anyway.
Yes. We always talk about that, especially for food and beverage brands that are like doing sampling or doing events. Like anytime you go somewhere, right? It can be like you can be selling product at a flea market and you're like, oh, well, that's not that great because I'm only going to be selling it to 20 people. No, well, make content about every single one of those interactions. Now you have 20 pieces of content that you can throw out there and like, hey, maybe one hits and then that drives all of these online sales for you. It's like the easiest thing to do, like just documenting your interactions with customers.
And the other thing is like kind of contriving your launch is fine too. So the leather brand that we have started as, it's a husband and wife I work with on this. And the husband was going to like literal, like the Austin, like not like swap meets, but like where all the vendors will set up and like selling leather stuff there and not doing bad, right? Eventually they stopped doing it because like e-commerce and wholesale is a big business, but being like, cool, I can go move $1,000 worth of product this Saturday. And that is a real thing. And one thing I've done 2 car shows near me with like the valuable car mats and stuff and like sold a pretty, not like a non-insignificant amount of product. But again, if I was doing a launch, I'd just go do it at one of those and be making content. No one even needs to know it's a launch. You don't have to invite. You just be like, like invite the list, do it out there. But like, there's people there. You pay your $400 setup fee or whatever, and you make enough money to sell out of it. Like, I think a lot of people are so afraid of doing like an in-person sales thing. And like, I learned more at ComplexCon and like selling stuff to kids than it would having months of internet research.
Yes, 1,000,000%. And it gets you so good knowing who your customer is, what their common questions are. I mean, like when you're selling, like in certain product categories, you're not going to have like a lot of like, you don't need to refine the sales pitch that much, but you pick up on all of these insights and like, it seems like more work, but I think it actually gives you a lot more energy and insight.
An anchor. And again, the content there is an anchor. Like, And especially if you have like, everyone's always like, oh, this is a product or it's like services, same thing. Like, I'm almost like I talk about content all the time, right? So I'm always like, whether it's like our friends and people, our neighbors, and it's like, oh, you're a realtor, or you own a salon, or you do whatever, and they're all like, oh, how do we do Instagram? And I'm like, you guys have so many endless capabilities. Like guys are like, how do I do a realtor video that's different than anyone else? I'm like, I don't know. Can you just do a funny thing at the start? Can you just start on a downward angle, like or like get a?
Can you do anything else?
Anything, right? Yeah, like. And just can you do the whole thing? Like one of the guys I was this dude I know that lives down the street, he's like speaks fluent Spanish and he's like very like white and square. And I was like, bro, you got to do that shit bilingual. Fucking every sentence. I'm like, that shit would be hilarious. And you get all these commenters being like, damn, this guy really like knows the language. There's so many options. And the salon, that's the other one too. Like give me before and after. Like, and you know what will make women actually want to do it is be like, yo, we have a pro camera setup and I will give you some nice photos every time we do this. Like there is very few people that are going to be like, fuck it,
1,000%. Wow, are we buying a salon? That's the question.
What's the next misconception? Yeah.
All right, next big myth. I need to hire a full-time team.
Yeah, I'll dispel that with my boy Matt, who owns Chlorophyll Water, who is like 3 years into business. They're in Sprouts and Whole Foods, like in multi-million. I'm pretty sure he's still the only full-time employee. And like he has like the rest is like contractors and agencies and stuff. Because that's what you need to do to survive in consumer packaged goods.
Yep.
But I talk about this a lot because like again, so Understated Leather, to the couple that owns it, one full-time employee, and me and one other person who are like work on specific things. That is the extent of the team. We're in Anthropologie, Revolve, Free People, doing like all the big e-commerce business. Like, and also when we're looking at the projection to get to like 10 mil plus, I don't think we need like one more person maybe. You don't need that now. That's I think what the key thing people need to realize about this is like you just don't need that many people.
Yes,
what do you think?
You don't need that many. There aren't enough functions in a consumer brand at an early stage, call it sub $30 million, where these functions can be full-time 40-hour-a-week roles. Like you don't need that full-time finance person. You don't need a full-time customer service associate. You don't need a full-time social person. So almost every brand that we work with on the agency side, I mean, that'll span anywhere from doing $2 million a year to $50 million a year. 98% of them are just using specialized freelancers or specialized agencies that they maybe tap for a handful of hours a week.
I think, and the biggest toolkit you can have, like I'm dealing with this right now with valuable stuff, right? Where it's like, I don't need full time on any of that. It's my wife and I working on it primarily, and then Darkroom doing the graphics. And it's but it's about SOPs, right? Because I have people overseas and other folks who can handle SOPs. And what I mean by that is like, so for instance, customer service is a good one. It's like, what happens when someone does X? Okay, we do Y. So if someone requests a turn, cool, no questions asked, return it. Someone has a size swap, here's how you do a size swap with a loom, right? And then we have other customer service. We are one of our big initiatives this last 3 months was customer service. And so we have an initiative where we talk to every single customer who gets a personal outreach from me or my wife, right? And there's an SOP for that. And now we've built this database of all the responses we get that we could turn into, okay, an employee could do that. But I think with a lot of these things, like I'm always doing it with that in mind. Like I'm working through seeding right now. Seeding is my next big plan. And it's like, cool, I'll do seeding for the first 2 weeks. But then once I have an SOP, and it's like, this is every question. This is exactly how you do this. This is what I expect to see every week. And here's what our results are. That is going to get passed to a person on Upwork, right? And that is the end of it. And I think that most businesses need to look at what they do by saying, oh, I have 2 spots, I need a bigger team, is like, oh, I have to do all this stuff. And it's like, no, you need to do it long enough to create a process to then be like, okay, what is this really? Is this 2 hours a week? Is this 4 hours a week? Okay, then how do I fill that process in and become, if you are excellent at making the process, finding a person to get in the process, that's actually the killer skill set.
Yes. I think that leads, I think you're basically hitting upon like this myth, which is number one, I need to also do everything at once. Like I need to be seeding, I need to be running Meta, I need to be running email, I need to be selling in retail. There's all of these marketing and distribution channels and all of these other things that you need to be doing with your business. And one of the, I think, biggest myths is like, you have to do all of those things. That like 80% of your leverage in sales is probably just going to come from like one channel and like finding excellence in one place, like Goalie Nutrition, right? The company that we've talked about before was on the verge of bankruptcy. Okay. They raised a ton of money, business was on its last legs. And then they like turned around their entire business exclusively off of TikTok Shop. And they're like, we're not just going to get good at TikTok Shop. We're going to get good at like the entire ecosystem of TikTok. And then, hey, once we got good at it, it's not just like, oh, okay, now let's go do all of these other 10,000 things. They were like, no, we're going to go even deeper. We're going to like build these crazy incentives. And then we're going to like give creators like Lambos if they sell like a lot of product for us. And that's one channel. And they were doing like $8 million a month.
Well, I think, and we talked about this earlier this week, because I'm looking at it because I have to. This is so for my new brand, I'm like basically stuck in, I only have so much time. I love working on it. I love doing stuff like that, but I have been realistically, it's like maybe 6 or 8 hours a week, like maybe. And like, that's just not that much time. And so to do it, that means that you really only focus on one thing. And I was like, cool, I'm going to focus on one thing at a time. And the first thing we focused on was Meta ads. And right now I have one product that has hits the ROAS target that doesn't scale but stays at a level that is sustainable, that helps the business run, and that is done. I now have a process where I bring new ads in, I bring new creative in, I can continue to run Meta will get better. And so then but then I was like, I can only focus on one thing at a time. If I was trying to do seeding, have good organic content, have good meta ads, have good the other, I just simply wouldn't do it. It would all be mediocre. And so in the last 3 months was literally experience. I was like, cool, we had done maybe 1,000 customers, something like that. First 1,000 customers, I was like, cool, I want to lock that in. That is my number one priority, is as a brand that I'm doing this for 7 years regardless. This is going long term. It's all I'm thinking about. I want to make sure those 1,000 people feel special, that I have a personal relationship from the brand to them, and that when I go sell things, the most of those people in perpetuity in the future buy in. Because if I can get 100 of those 1,000 people to buy in every time, that's going to mean that all these launches are going to break even like automatically. So customer service was like focus 2. We got that. That's an SOP. My wife handles it. That's done. Now it's seeding. I'm like, cool, I am not good at TikTok Shop. I have not gotten enough influencers my shit. This is the next phase. But like, that's a realistic way to run a business. And guess what? I'm talking about a 9-month timeline right there. That's 9 fucking months to get 3 things done. But guess what? You keep stacking that. Your horizon being 7 years, or 8 years to like get your brand to where you want it to be, and you're gonna be in a great place.
Yeah, I think you break down really well the importance of just doing things serially and testing those things, right? You're going to be in this place where you're doing the TikTok influencer seeding stuff, and you're going to do that for 3 months. And you're like, hey, in that 3-month period, I reached out to 2,000 people, and maybe 30 of them accepted the product. And then it's like, hey, relative to the time spent here and like the outcomes from like them posting, is this even worthwhile? And then you either say yes or no. And if you say no, it's like, great. Well, at least I didn't go hire an agency for $5,000 a month to do seeding on my behalf, only to end up 6 months from now with no content. And now I'm down in the whole $24,000.
Yeah, because I feel like you have to know time. The biggest thing to me as a like if you're in a founder position, and even if you're in a manager position, is you need to know the time things take. You don't have to be a meta ads expert. You don't have to be a seeding expert. But if you've done it and you go, okay, writing this outreach takes X time. Following up with this takes X time. Oh, this unexpected thing I didn't even think about takes 6 more hours than expected. But then when you're actually hiring, you're like, is this a full-time? Is this a part-time? And what is their expectation? And if you can get that nailed, you start to realize, guess what? Seeding is 10 hours a week or whatever it is. And the SOP is here. And I know, and if I want to triple the amount of people, which will then lead to X amount more sales, okay, now it's a 30-hour week thing, but the expectations are way higher. And like that is what I feel like founders need to be responsible for, is really what does this time take? And then what does more time actually get me? And then is it worth it at all? But yeah, I see so many people who are trying to do it all, and we're doing X or Y, and they're all doing all of it mediocre. And I think, and because they want it to be done fast, and it doesn't work. And it's just like, guess what? Set your time horizon longer. And this is part of internet culture where they're like, first drop, $100,000, first play X and Y. And it's just like, guess what? Life doesn't work like that. Sometimes it does, and that's fucking amazing, but you can't plan for it.
Yeah. And I think especially in the world of building consumer brands, like, yeah, there are some that skyrocket. Here's the other thing, this like overarching thing, right? When people look at brands that are successful, they like hear this like really clear narrative of like, oh, that brand scaled to $50 million in 2 years because they did this one thing. Like, let me unpack their funnel and do that. And it's like, hey, you have this like reductive, like, rear window, like narrative being told, and you actually don't have the full picture, because like the full like secret sauce and nuances of everything that worked in the favor of this business is like not publicly out there. Unless you were like the founder and like the operating that business day in and day out, you don't actually know the truth. And so don't look at someone else's success and be like, I'm going to go do this.
It's funny. We have friends that do this kind of content. I hate that content, right? If you want to break down someone's content playbook, great. You can probably determine from looking at their content what the content does, their ad playbook, their email. But if you're like, hey, this launch did 14 million or this brand did 30 million, this is why. It's like, bro, you have no fucking idea. Like straight up. Like, and that number's a good hook and the brand name's a good hook, but like this is just not how this works. Like, and so that content for me is like very frustrating, because then it also creates this perception amongst the new entrepreneurial community that if I just follow these few steps, and again, like you can do a content playbook and that will get you the success that content could get for you, but applying it to a fiscal number, and it's like, yeah, guess what? Do you know their COGS? Like, okay, then none of it fucking matters, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, this is funny because I was in Cut 30 with you guys talking about content. We always talk about Frida and how I did this work with Frida. And it's like, hey, their content rips, right? We did like 100 million views in 9 months for them. It like really did a lot of great things for the business. And we can break down the elements of how we architected that content, right? With the visual hooks, the verbal hooks, all of this stuff. there are some product categories that we can apply that to, but there's a lot of brands where like we can't see those same results. Like there is this inherent virality in the products and the audience that we're speaking to that gives it this natural lift, right? So if you are to, from the outside, look at Frida and say, hey, here is the content playbook that they used, or like, here's how they structured their content to get these insane wins. Go apply this to your business. It's like, well, you're missing the most crucial thing, which is their products all solve these like very peculiar problems and were like visually demonstrable and viral. Not a lot of brands have that like inherent DNA.
And I think this ties to a good point we should make here, which is designing your products for content, which is like when I was doing my initial products, I was like definitely thinking through that. I was like, cool, like even like the first, I did the pants that were like see-through, and I did the shirts that had all the holes in them because I knew they'd get comments. I was like, cool, this is just, it's a normal product, but people are going to hate it. And like, that's going to be good. That will lift it in the algorithm. And then same thing with car stuff. I was like, I know I can make content around car stuff. Like you put it in the car, there's a whole car thing there. And then now with the product that I have that sells the best, the shoe bag, it's like, it's problem solution oriented. And like now I'm looking at it being like, all right, how can I get a visual hook on screen? Or how do I have two more things I can call out where it's like, and it also does X. And it's like, if you're designing products like that, you can run a content playbook for like of something. But to your point, if you don't have those things that are designed to either get visual attention or have a value prop that gets solved, like it doesn't matter. Like you apply that same thing to a completely commoditized product, like maybe it gives it an incremental lift just because it's more thought through, but it's that real symbiosis of this. And this is another thing. I was at another L'Oreal panel. I was on the L'Oreal panel circuit, but they were mentioning like the CMO was like of L'Oreal USA was like, hey, we have a social listening team, we have a product marketing team, and I really wish they were one team. She's like, the product marketing needs to be the one, because she's like, the amount of insights social listening gets at the scale of a business like that's like tens of billions of dollars or more is radical. And I'm like, that's actually for them, that's an org design challenge. For your business, that is like who has less than 5 people, that is a obsession challenge, right? You need to be like in the mix of that, like every second, right?
Yes,
that's easier to solve.
Yeah, I mean, social listening, I almost think it like has to be, it's an issue with how it has been labeled. Yeah. Because
it's like a PR function or a marketing function. And really it's a CX function, And then CX function, even that isn't good. It's a product function.
It's all of that, and it's like it's a research function too, right? Where if you're a brand and you're building like new products and within a certain category, first thing you're going to go do is go look at all of the competitors, look at where they're getting 1-star reviews, and what are the issues that people have with the product. And it's like, okay, let's design or solve for this. And you can apply this in any category, physical products or services businesses. The same conversations are not just happening in Amazon reviews or like, review sections. They're happening online. They're happening on social. So it's like, it's not social listening. It's like, I can go research an entire product category and brand to build off of other people's like, complaints about other brands.
Yeah. And I think how few people actually search TikTok for this, because TikTok is the king of this, right? Instagram search, like Reels is great. Instagram is great. Search is terrible. You cannot get to content that's active about it. TikTok search is amazing. And so one thing, what I do anytime I'm in a new niche, and this is something I've now been requiring people I work with to do that is quite the point of contention, is I'm like, you need 500 videos. I want you to watch 500 videos. And then you'll get an understanding of what's happening, right? Until you reach that amount where you're like, then you can tell, oh, this is an influencer video. Oh, this is sponsored content. Oh, this person actually is kind of faking it. Oh, this is a good video about it. Oh, this is a real customer video about it. You get that at volume. But like, so I've done this in cosmetics where I don't know the category. I work a ton in cosmetics, but I like in the mid-lux category, the lux category, and the bottom category, I've watched 500 videos in each. I now have a pretty complete fucking understanding of why people prefer this tinted sunscreen versus that, shade issues, whatever it is. And the fact that like, most people just have not submersed themselves to that level, and you can do it all in search. And so I would highly encourage you, like in that category. I did the same thing when I was looking at heavyweight tees. I'm like, do people really want ultra heavyweight stuff? And the answer is yes. There's not only people promoting heavyweight constantly, there's consumers being like, this thing is heavier than this thing, or I like heavy because it feels like X or Y, or I layer heavy with Y. It's like every single category has that locked in. And people are like, is there really 500 videos? There's 500 fucking TikTok videos on essentially anything.
Yes. I think good tie-in to like a campaign that I saw maybe from last year on social listening and product marketing. There was this. Did you see this girl? She reviewed every hoodie that she could buy from a brand to see which hoodies the most, and she was looking for like all of these like parameters for it to be the perfect hoodie. Had like 2 million views, right? And people were so invested in that series. So Gap hit her up, and her and Gap did a collab to make the perfect hoodie based on all of her parameters. They launched it as a drop, sold out, like did great.
So another thing too, if you're looking into that, making content about it would be great. So when I was getting deep into cosmetics, we were doing this report like 7 or 8 months ago. I bought every cosmetic. I went through it with my wife. We got all the packaging, and guess what? I made content along the way. I had a banger. I had a video do like 500,000 views. It's just me being like, here's the packaging I like of cosmetics, because I had to buy it anyway because I'm doing market research. It's just like, to her point of her parameters, like, yo, go establish your proprietary method and make some fucking content along the way. Like, right, like even when I was like, I was just thinking about that. We had almost done that with a secondary, like when I was at Gel Blaster, we were looking at buying another YouTube channel. It was like a reviews channel for like airsoft or something. And it was like, hey, we could buy this channel. We could buy every product on the market, which we have to do anyway. Our engineering team, we have every single product of any related toy blaster. And it's like, we might as well just review them all on this channel and have like a whole separate outlet. We didn't end up doing it. But like, that's a interesting brand play, especially while you're building. You're like, how do I make content while I'm building? You want to make a fragrance? Review 71 fragrances in the 71 days between now and when your product launches. And like, guess what kind of authority you're going to have on social media when you go.
100%. I love this. I mean, we could go for hours on this. Should have just made this live stream. All right. Our final myth here. You should only build an e-commerce business.
Yeah, this is one I'm also equally passionate about, where I'm like, omni-channel businesses, like D2C, the whole concept of D2C, I feel like is like fundamentally flawed. Like, if you are getting attention on social media, then if you are only selling on your website, like if you're getting small attention, whatever, you start to get a decent amount of attention. If you're not on Amazon, you're losing customers to someone who's just looking for that and then buying a competitor. And then with retail, then you'll start to realize, like, the faster you at least have one retail relationship and are evaluating what it takes and learning like all the systems you have to submit data into and like what it takes to actually do that, the better you're prepared for some real scale. And so, again, it's not like about going too wide. It's about being like, hey, we are not like a D2C business. We are open to all opportunities. And basically at X amount of scale, we should consider Amazon, which I usually look at, like when you start cracking 6 figures on D2C and people are really searching for your brand, it kind of makes sense to really consider Amazon. And then like getting a retailer, like a pilot retailer, as soon as you can in your trajectory, just to have that one thing, that one place, that one idea to where you're like, okay, let me validate this, I feel like is the real brand plan. And if that goes well, you may have a much bigger business much faster than you expected.
Yes. I think there's, it's funny because I was having this conversation with one of my partners in SunPowder, and he is close friends with like a lead buyer at Nordstrom. And she was like, hey, we want to buy SunPowder and like stock it in Nordstrom, like let's roll out in retail. And he was super excited about this. He's like, we should go do this. And like, we had barely launched e-commerce at this point. And I told him like, listen, retail is going to make sense at some point, but we need to, it's not just about getting on shelf in retail. It's about actually selling. Because if we don't sell in like 2 months, Nordstrom is going to kick us out. And then it's like, hey, we go try to do retail somewhere else. And they're going to be like, have you ever sold in retail before? And maybe this case study like gets around. And it's like, hey, we're going to set ourselves up for failure if we're not like it very intelligently planned around form factor, pricing, our promotional strategy, our merchandise, our sales. So I think whenever a brand is thinking about getting into retail, they have to work. I mean, there's all of these brokerage groups. One brokerage group that you've worked with in the past that is also a sponsor of this pod is called Platform. Platform, basically, if you want to get into Sprouts, Whole Foods, Costco, Target, etc., you go through them. They have incredibly deep relationships with all of these partners, but they know exactly how to evaluate your brand, how you've been selling online, what your kind of like go-to-market retail strategy should be. And they make sure that you are set up for success there. So you don't just get on shelves, but you stay on shelves. You increasingly get more shelf space, that you're merchandised well, that you have that sell-through. So they're kind of like invaluable for brands getting into retail, but also brands in retail that just want to sell more. They take on brands that are doing like $500 million and they're like, we're going to scale you to the next billion in retail.
Yeah, and I think to the point of what we talked about earlier, it's like, cool, go find that one store or that one chain, local and regionally, go do your product demos in store, you do it, have some of your team do it, understand what your natural sell-through looks like, get friendly with a buyer, try have a home base, right? Have something where you're trying it for. When we first had started with Gel Blaster, it was hardware stores, literally hardware stores in Texas. We had a guy on the road driving around to do that, but then you got to understand, we do a product demo, we sell X. If we're just on the shelf, we sell Y. And then go take that data to someone like a Platform and be like, here's what we're doing. What's a plan? What's a realistic retail scale plan that gets us to X and Y? And if you have some exciting data, if you're like, hey, actually, we're the best performing natural protein bar at this chain, we think it could do X and Y, you'll see their eyes light up, right? And they'll go like, oh, we could really move this. And also they'll go tell you if you're like your data isn't good enough or go X and here's the things you need to evaluate, and you can go make a plan. So I think that is a useful call out and shout out to our sponsor Platform.
Yeah. And I think the final point I just want to say here, because I see a lot of brands or owners being stubborn about where they want to sell because of the economics of their business, and they want to control this. So say you're making a beverage brand, right? Canned beverage brand, and you're like, no, I want to sell D2C because I want to own my customer data and I'm going to have better margins doing that. I'm going to do all this stuff. And it's like, that's just a selfish point of view. And I think in everything, like the overarching thing that you should evaluate every aspect of your business is this in my self-interest or is it in my customer's self-interest? And the more like answers that you can design around everything being in your customer's self-interest, the more successful you're going to be. So for example, if you're selling in the supplements category, you need to know that 85% of people who buy supplements want to do so off of Amazon. Like, I don't care how nice your site is or how beautiful it is or how much you want to own that customer data. If you're simply not in the marketplace where they want to and prefer purchasing that product category, you're just not going to win. So it's like you need to figure out your margins on the back end and like how you're going to capitalize it to meet customers where they are. I think that is the critical part of selling product, is meeting people where they are.
Well, also, retail is a moat, and this works for you and against you. If you are of a new category or a new thing, and you're the first person to really hit through retail, you can basically lock in your ownership of your category to a certain, even though people will come up behind you. But if you make something and it's successful, and a bigger company that's already in retail goes, now, well, we're going to clone it, they have the moat. You're now an incumbent against the thing that already has mass distribution. We fought against this with Gel Blaster with Nerf, where it was like, cool, we're up and coming, we're getting in all this big box, and they're like, oh no, cool, we're actually everywhere, and we can launch a cheaper product even if it's not as good. And you'll see even with styles, like we have clothing that's been knocked off by like Forever 21 and people like that. It's cool. Like now this is ubiquitously available. And so I do think that, to the point of your customer's interest and also your business's interest, like if you are at the head of something, you'll realize that ideas can be copied. Distribution is much harder to copy. And if you can get ahead, if you have ideas and distribution, all of a sudden you can stay ahead of the game.
Yes. This idea of retail being defensive, I agree that it is defensive for all of the reasons that you mentioned. But I was having this interesting call with a team that works on Cheetos, and
Chester's.
they were showing me this brand called Chester's, and basically in the Cheetos portfolio, they have their Cheetos Flamin' Hot, but then they also have like these Chester's fries, which is more of like the value brand, right? So the Chester's products are at about half the price of Cheetos. And the idea here was actually just to get more shelf space and have it's a defensive strategy to have that more accessible price point one. So there wasn't going to be a new brand that comes in that space and takes that shelf space and
this
takes
is something
market
a lot
share.
more D2C people do than you'd expect. You actually go on Amazon, and you see knockoffs. More and more now, those knockoffs are just owned by the main company. It's like it's a strategy. Yeah.
Yes, 100%. And it's been like a big CPG conglomerate strategy forever, which is why you go look at P&G and it's like, hey, why do they own 47 brands of toothpaste? And it's like,
well, the other thing I've seen now is the cool brands, the cool streetwear brands, knowing they're getting knocked off on DHgate, going to a DHgate factory and being like, you're going to do this, but we're going to get the customer info, we're going to get the kickback, and you're never going to get like a takedown. And so like this is and I saw like there's like 7 or 8 of those conversations that I've been privy to, like being in China, which is just fascinating. And people being like, cool, we know our brand equity is going away. Someone's gonna make the shitty t-shirt on it. I at least want the data. It's like hilarious.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, you got to play the game.
All right, cool. We appreciate y'all joining us. If any of these myths have spoken to you or you want some more detail on them in a future pod, please comment below. We will send all this out in the newsletter as well, so you'll have this and kind of a breakdown on it. So you can get that in the same link below where you can check out Platform. And then, we are the Brand Fathers on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, anywhere else. Are we present anywhere else? Snap Show coming soon?
We're omnipresent. We're in the ether. So.
Is there some omnipotent? All right, anyway.
We are omnipotent.
Appreciate y'all watching.